The bar without an exit. The first thing he noticed was the sign. Exit. Its red letters glowed faintly on the wall, humming softly in the stillness. But there was no door beneath it, just a blank, unbroken stretch of wall. The room was vast yet oppressive, as if the air were heavier than it should be. The walls were a dull yellow, their surface smooth and featureless, except for the stains of shadows that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. In the center of the room sat a long, polished bar, its dark wood glistening under flickering fluorescent lights. He didn't know how he'd gotten there. One moment, he was running from something, though he couldn't remember what. The next, he was here. Time felt warped, stretched thin, like he had been in this place forever, but had only just arrived. The bartender stood behind the counter, hands folded neatly. His expression was eerily calm, his movements precise, too deliberate. Two women sat at the bar. One swirled the liquid in her glass, her red hair gleaming under the light. The other stared blankly ahead, unmoving, her back rigid like a statue. And then there was the man in the suit, a figure from a different time it seemed. His smirk was faint, almost imperceptible, as though he found some private joke endlessly amusing. He leaned casually against the counter, his gaze fixed on nothing. Through the massive window they waved. Faceless figures stood in the pale fog outside, their arms frozen mid-motion, waving to something or someone within. They were blurred, their outlines indistinct, as if the world couldn't quite hold them in focus. He stared at them, unease rising in his chest. Were they greeting him? Warning him? He approached the window cautiously, but the figures didn't react. The world beyond was white and endless, the fog swallowing everything. He tapped the glass lightly, and the silence swallowed the sound. "They can't help you?" The bartender's voice broke the silence, startling him. He turned. "Who are they?" The bartender shrugged. "Who are we?" It wasn't an answer, but it felt like the only one he was going to get. "Drink?" the bartender offered, his tone unnervingly polite. "No," the man managed, his voice hoarse. "Suit yourself," the bartender replied, polishing an empty glass with mechanical precision. The man turned back to the sign, his pulse quickening. The word exit glowed faintly, its promise of freedom mocking him. He ran his hands over the wall beneath it, searching for a seam, a hidden door, anything. But there was nothing, just smooth, unyielding wall. The suited man chuckled softly behind him. "It's not there," he said, his voice dripping with amusement. "It never was." The man spun to face him. "What is this place?" "It's nowhere," the bartender replied. "And now it's yours." "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "There's always a way out." "Sure there is," the detective said with a smirk, nodding toward the sign. "Right there." He pounded his fist against the wall beneath the sign. The sound barely echoed, swallowed by the oppressive stillness of the room. He turned back to the others, desperation in his voice. "Why am I here? How do I leave?" The red-haired woman finally turned toward him. Her hollow eyes bored into him. "It's coming," she said softly, her voice devoid of emotion. "What's coming?" he asked, his voice trembling. "The way out," the bartender replied, "but it won't let you leave." A chill ran down his spine as he felt the air shift. A low, droning hum filled the room, vibrating through his chest. The faceless figures outside began to wave faster now, their arms trembling violently as they pressed closer to the glass. He stumbled backward, his gaze darting from the figures to the others at the bar. The detective's smirk grew wider, unnaturally so. The bartender tilted his head slightly, as if observing an experiment. The red-haired woman raised her glass, her lips curling into a faint, lifeless smile. The hum grew louder. Shadows stretched across the room, impossibly long and curling at the edges like smoke. The window flickered, and suddenly, the faceless figures weren't outside anymore. They were inside. He turned to run, but his feet refused to move. The room seemed to fold in on itself, stretching and twisting like a funhouse mirror. The glowing exit sign dimmed, its red light fading into nothingness. "You'll get used to it," the bartender said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. The man spun around, his breath catching in his throat. The others were watching him now, their expressions blank, their eyes empty. The detective chuckled. "Welcome to nowhere." And for the first time, he understood. The faceless figures weren't strangers. They were him.